After leaving us puzzling over the riddle of unexplained variations in the habits of living in different states, and so an unexplained variation in the ratio of resources to population from place to place, Malthus turns right back to his favorite theme throughout the first essay, as though nothing has happened. In the 10th chapter, we again find him preoccupied with debunking Godwin's utopian socialist dream of the perfection of humanity through social engineering. The essay does tend to wander in these circles instead of sticking to some kind of cumulative logical outline. If we remind ourselves that he wrote this essay shortly after he finished university and took up his job as a curate, perhaps we might see this as a reflection of the rhetorical habits of the pulpit. Sunday sermons frequently keep coming back to the same central point in order to fix it solidly in the minds of listeners by repetition. Unfortunately, the technique does not translate very effectively into written discourse, particularly in the first essay. This time Malthus goes into greater detail about why he thinks that Godwin's paradise is impossible. He sketches a thought experiment in two parts. First, he assumes that the perfect world imagined by Godwin could actually be set up in England, painting a picture for us in words of such a landscape.
Let us suppose that all the causes of misery and vice in this island removed. Unwholesome trades and manufactories do not exist. Crowds no longer collect together in great and pestilent cities for purposes of court intrigue, of commerce, and vicious gratifications. Simple, healthy, and rational amusements take the place of drinking, gaming, and debauchery. There are no towns sufficiently large to have any prejudicial effects upon the human constitution. The greater part of the happy inhabitants of this terrestrial paradise live in hamlets and farmhouses scattered over the face of the country. Every house is clean, airy, sufficiently roomy, and in a healthy situation. All men are equal. The labors of luxury are at an end, and the necessary labors of agriculture are shared amicably among all. The number of persons and the produce of the island we suppose both to be the same as at present. The spirit of benevolence, guided by impartial justice, will divide this produce among all the members of the society according to their wants, and will be sufficient to preserve them in health, strength, and spirits. It will be of little consequence, according to Mr. Godwin, how many children a woman had, or to whom they belonged. Provisions and assistance would spontaneously flow from the quarter in which they abounded to the quarter which was deficient, and every man will be ready to furnish instruction to the rising generation according to his capacity.
If this verbal landscape based on Godwin's utopian socialist ideals sounds familiar to us even today, it is because these visions have inspired fresh generations of people over the centuries since they first appeared. If you have read a little book by J.R.R. Tolkien called The Hobbit, you will recognize that the Shire, the peaceful countryside where the hobbits live, is basically this painting by Malthus brought to life. The utopian socialist vision has inspired people in every age to try to build such communities in the real world, usually on a small local scale, such as the Oneida religious community founded in 1848 in upstate New York, or countless contemporary communes from the redwood forests of California to the rock-bound coast of New England that have attracted members in our time. But Malthus sets up this picture only to destroy it. Having painted paradise and its inhabitants, he sets the scene in motion and introduces his two assumptions about the powers of increase in population and subsistence.
As we are supposing no anxiety about the future support of children to exist, I do not conceive that there will be one woman in 100 of 23 years without a family. With these extraordinary encouragements to population, and every cause of depopulation, as we have supposed, removed, the numbers would necessarily increase faster than in any society that has ever yet been known.
Malthus imagines that the food supply might keep up with this exponential population growth for a generation or perhaps a little longer, but that eventually this growth would outstrip the means of subsistence and shortages would begin to be felt.
Alas, what becomes of the picture where men lived in the midst of plenty? This beautiful fabric of imagination vanishes at the severe touch of truth. The spirit of benevolence, cherished and invigorated by plenty, is repressed by the chilling breath of want. The mighty law of self-preservation expels all the softer and more exalted emotions of the soul. Provisions no longer flow for the support of the mother with a large family. The children are sickly from insufficient food. The rosy flush of health gives place to the pallid cheek and hollowed eye of misery. Benevolence, yet lingering in a few bosoms, makes some faint, expiring struggles, until at length self-love resumed his wonted empire and lords it triumphant over the world. Benevolence has established her reign in all hearts, and yet in so short a period as within 50 years, violence, oppression, falsehood, misery, every hateful vice, and every form of distress which degrade and sadden the present state of society seem to have been generated by laws inherent in the nature of man and absolutely independent of all human regulation.
Malthus even goes so far as to suggest that most of the social institutions that Godwin described as the vicious causes of human suffering are actually logical coping mechanisms by which societies have adjusted to the pressure of population on resources. Shortages caused by population growth would call into being laws that protected each household's food and other resources as private property to prevent hungry strangers from stealing it by force. In the same way, with the population growing faster than the food supply, marriage and parental obligations would appear, with the goal
to make every man provide for his own children, as it might be expected that no man would bring beings into the world for whom he could not find the means of support, that where this were the cause, it seemed necessary for the example of others that the disgrace and inconvenience attendant upon such a conduct should fall upon the individual who had thus inconsiderately plunged himself and innocent children into misery and want.
Malthus then closes the 10th chapter of his essay with a final point that eventually will turn out to play a key role in resolving the riddle of how some societies manage to develop habits of living that involve more than just the minimum survival level of resources per person. Malthus insists that once you establish both private property and the duty of parents to support their own children, inequality and stratification of life chances follow as inevitable results.
When these two laws of society, the security of property and the institution of marriage, were once established, equality of conditions must necessarily follow. Those who were born after the division of property would come into a world already possessed. The members of a family which was grown too large for the original division of land appropriated to it could not then demand a part of the surplus produce of others as a debt of justice. All those who were in want of food would be urged by imperious necessity to offer their labor in exchange for this article so absolutely essential to subsistence. The fund appropriated for the maintenance of labor will be the aggregate quantity of food possessed by the owners of land beyond their own consumption. On the state of this fund, the happiness or the degree of misery prevailing among the lower classes of people in every known state at present depends.
By this reasoning, Malthus tries to prove that private property, marriage, and the responsibilities of parents are inevitable byproducts of the superior power of population, and that stratification of people into social classes of owners and workers is an inevitable byproduct of private property, marriage, and parental obligations. There is no possibility of escape into socialist utopias. If established, such schemes would revert to the previous world in a generation or two due to the power of population. And yet, the troubling riddle of those different levels of living in different states and the different ratios of resources per person that prevail in different societies still lurk on the edges of this utopian sand painting that Malthus has first drawn and then destroyed. The more you think about such variations and about the contradiction that this implies in the basic logic that Malthus uses, the more uncomfortable you should become with his assertions that the picture he has painted is indeed inevitable.